My first partner in business completely screwed me over, stole everything, physical property, intellectual property, launched, as if I had nothing to do with the process.
Welcome to another episode of How Musicians Make It. My name's Adam, and I'll be your host. This is a show about artistry and industry in music, and we recently changed our name. So if you are familiar with the Gig Boss podcast, that was us. Now we're How Musicians Make It. And on this show, we talk to artists and industry professionals, and I talk about everything I've learned as a musician over the last 15 years, playing professionally in a lot of different contexts. And like everybody I talk to on this show, my career is going to look different than your career, and your career is going to look different than everybody I talk to. If you don't know, the podcast is brought to you by Gig Boss. Gig Boss is my company. It's an app that's an organizational tool for musicians. I encourage you to check it out and use it. For me, the most difficult part about being a musician has been organizing my schedule and organizing my finances. And this basically takes care of that nugget, that problem, right? I've talked to a lot of musicians who are like, yo, I don't need more gigs. And I know some of you are like, I do need more gigs. But I've talked to a lot of musicians that are in my shoes that are like, I don't need more gigs necessarily. I just need a secretary. I need a way to track everything. I need a way to communicate to people. And so Gig Boss, that's why we built it. It can be found on iOS and Android, and it's totally free as of now. Thank you for coming back. I know it's been a bit of a break. It's been summertime, and I've been out playing a whole bunch of music with a lot of people, and I just needed a break. I needed a break from doing this. And I mentioned I had an episode on the show called How to Fall in Love with Music Again, and I mentioned taking a break. And that's certainly what I needed with the podcast. I needed some time. But during that time, I did do some interviews. So I just thought, we're coming up at the end of the summer here, and I'll bring you a few interviews in a row here that are really fantastic, and then we'll keep rolling with the show. Those of you who've been listening, you've probably been checking out the 17 Singles in 17 Weeks campaign that I was running with Lulu's Playground, and that got crazy. I mean, that was like, we were up to 6,000 monthly listeners at one point. The songs were all hitting Spotify algorithmic playlists, and then the songs that didn't get past that certain threshold of listens in the first couple of days, in order to get it shoved onto Spotify algorithmic playlists, those songs ended up not getting many plays. So it's kind of a wild world out there. And I think one of the things that I learned from that, and I bet people are curious because I'm sorry that I took so much time off. I was going to continue updating about that, but it just got too nuts. Here's what I learned from that. You can release things in an advantageous way. You can release things in a way that will encourage Spotify to put your songs onto algorithmic playlists. Really, this whole thing was about algorithmic playlists. I was hoping I would get placed on an editorial releasing 17 singles, but I was placed mostly on algorithmic playlists. The page basically went from 0 monthly listeners to over 6,000. So it was, I think, a huge success when you look at it that way. But if you go to the page now, you'll see that we've got about 105 or something monthly listeners that are still hanging around after our 17-week campaign. So would I call that a success? I don't know. Like, a whole bunch of people heard our music. It was cool to have a little bit of buzz about the band again. Did a ton of people come and like the page? No. Some people did. So followers increased for sure. Monthly listeners have increased because we went from 0 to 6,000, and now we're hovering around a little over 100. Would I do 17 in a row again? No. So that's the thing that really, to me, like, that's the thing that was the most revealing, was that sustaining the energy of promoting a release every week for 17 weeks was really tough, especially because I had other gigs to promote that I had going on. I was like learning parts for bands and going out on the road and playing a bunch, and it was just hard to, like, every Friday be like, I got to post about this. I got to remind my fans. I got to send emails out, right? So it was just tough to keep up with it. If I were to do it again, I might say, like, yeah, maybe 10 singles, over 10 weeks could work, or 7 singles over 7 weeks, 17 was like a lot. It was a lot. And it was really the early part of the campaign that got a lot of traction. If you're thinking about doing a bunch of short songs like those were, that could be an option. Maybe don't pin yourself down to 15, 20 tracks, but do it over the course of 7 to 10 weeks. And that's a bit more sustainable, especially if you don't have a whole lot going on otherwise. I also like released a couple singles in there with other people on my other pages. So it's just a lot. It was a lot for people who follow me to take in, and you can't expect everybody to go over there and check out every single track, right? But I do think there's some tracks on there that would be great for sync licensing, and I'm sending that stuff over to somebody at Marmoset Music this week. I've been emailing with him a little bit just to be like, hey, can I send you some stuff? And he said, cool, send me some stuff, send me some links. So I'm going to do that. And that's kind of the way to get things, started with getting connected with sync licensing folks. All right. I could probably do a whole episode on a reflection on that like 17 singles, 17 weeks campaign. And maybe I will do that. But today I want to bring you this interview with Adam Rapa. Now, Adam Rapa is like a virtuoso instrumentalist. He's one of the great trumpet players alive today. He's a bit of a controversial figure in the trumpet circle, but my interactions with him have all been awesome. And I have a buddy who works for his company, Lotus, which is becoming a quickly growing trumpet company. Rapa's just like this trumpet whisperer. He's like, he knows what to tell people to get them to play at their best. Trumpet's a mysterious instrument in some ways. It's really physical, and it's a lot about physics as well, and he just has a way of speaking that language so plainly and clearly that I think people are attracted to him and his teaching. And I think overall, like, their social media game has really blown up, even though Rapa kind of like, he'll say himself that he's not great at doing social media stuff. But he's had a really interesting career up to this point, and he's hit a lot of roadblocks, like places where he was broke and he couldn't afford to fund recording projects, even though he'd had a lot of success as a musician. He toured around with Blast, which was a really cool show, and was kind of featured as a soloist there. So, he had that happening and was touring and kind of learned how to handle the tour life, maintaining health and wellness while you're on the road, all that stuff. So we talk about that a little bit. But the thing that I really enjoyed talking to him about was how he was in this place of like, I don't have any money. I'm just trying to make my bills and play some trumpet. And at that time was when he decided, I got to start a trumpet company. And that's a huge idea. That's an expensive idea. And now it's become this thing that it's like a catalyst for him to be able to be a trumpet artist. It's like starting that company because there are now resources. It took a time for him to get there, which he'll talk about. But because there are now resources, he can use that as a way to get out into the world, do recording projects, play his horn, book some things, and we're going to start seeing that stuff pop up in the near future. So I thought it was a cool time to interview him. I stopped by the International Trumpet Guild Conference, which was happening in Minneapolis. I played some of their horns. My buddy Charlie, who I tour with in Youngblood Brass Band, works for Lotus, so Charlie was there. Charlie walked me through a whole bunch of their horns and their mouthpieces, and it was really fun. I play on a Lotus L2 mouthpiece. And I have to say, like, I know a lot of people listen to the show that aren't trumpet players, and I do occasionally interview trumpet players. I want you to know that his career is fascinating, and you're going to learn a lot just from hearing him speak. He's really a dynamic speaker. There's information for everybody here. We don't get into the weeds with trumpet and trumpet playing. I am not particularly into trumpet gear. Personally, it's like, for me, trumpet is like this means to an end. It's a tool that I use to make art. I don't consider myself only a trumpet player. So I consider myself to be a multi-instrumentalist and artist that sings and plays trumpet and plays guitar and plays piano and plays drums and plays bass. So I don't get deep into like the trumpet nerdom world. Before we start with the interview with Rapa, I just want to let you know that my orchestra, my 18-piece orchestra, the Adam Meckler Orchestra, we had a record called When the Clouds Look Like This in 2014. iTunes listed as one of the best jazz releases of 2014. But my orchestra also like mixes hip hop and R&B and pop music into this like traditional looking ensemble. This ensemble that looks like what you imagine a jazz big band would look like, but it doesn't really sound a whole lot like, Glenn Miller or, Duke Ellington even, or Count Basie. It's like Ellington, Basie, Mingus, big band. Those are some of my favorite big bands. My band doesn't really sound like that. Maria Schneider. So there's elements of those things, certainly. There's elements of the classic stuff, but there's a lot of like forward-thinking, modern-sounding stuff. And we're playing at Crooners in Minneapolis August 4th, Friday, August 4th. I'll put the ticket link in the description along with the other links for Adam Rapa's stuff. You guys could come out and hear what I do in real life. I'll be playing my horn. I'll be standing in front of my band. We'll be playing all my original compositions. It's a huge production. We're filming it. We're recording it. So this is one of the things I think about too as an artist is like, how do I maximize each opportunity I have, especially since I live remotely now and I have to travel into cities to play or I have to fly somewhere to go on tour. You know, how do I maximize those moments? And so I'm filming and recording the whole show, and I'll use that stuff as internet fodder, right? I'll use that stuff to just be like, look, I'm still around. I'm still doing this stuff. And please ask me to write a commission for your band or something, which is one of the ways that composers make money. So if you're a composer in the classical music sense or the jazz music sense, there's certainly a lot that I've dealt with that you could relate to in the world of that. But I'm also doing a lot of other stuff. I'm playing with Steve Cole's band coming up in mid-August at the Ames Center in Minneapolis. Steve Cole's this great smooth jazz tenor player, funk and smooth jazz. He was on the show, actually, because he's the head of music business at St. Thomas University. Basically was like a famous smooth jazz saxophone player in like the 90s and 2000s. Still crushing it. Still crushing the Spotify game. Go check out his Spotify numbers. They're stupid. So I'm playing with Steve Cole and doing a little recording session with my buddy Scott Agster, who played trombone on all that Nookie Jones stuff. He's writing a bunch of funk horn stuff that I'm going to play lead trumpet on, which has been a really fun challenge. It's like, you know, I'm not playing full-time anymore, so really making sure that my stuff's in shape, shedding all the time. I'm really getting in that routine now and getting down to business so that I can be sharp, playing Scott's music, playing Steve's music, playing my own music coming up in about a week. So August 4th is the Adam Meckler Orchestra at Crooners. August 2, I think it's 17th at the Ames Center in Minneapolis with Steve Cole, and then I'm in North Carolina with Steve Cole in November. So if you're a North Carolina person, you can send me a message and be like, yo, where are you going to be? And I'll probably talk about it at some point. And there's lots more I want to talk about. There's like so much more that's happened in the industry over the last 3 months that I've been thinking about. And we launched our Airbnb in February in our basement, and that's been a game changer. And it's made me think about like passive income and, you know, how can musicians create a sustainable life and still make art? I think about that stuff a ton, and the Airbnb has really been a financial game changer for us in terms of just lightening the pressure of having to constantly hustle and see if we can scrape together dollars to pay bills. And I've been rambling a while, but it's been a while. So I'm glad to talk to you and catch up, and I hope you're all crushing it and doing well and just having great summer gigs. You know, it's summertime, summer busy. But I also hope that you've got stuff booked into September, October, November, and December as well, because that's the lighter season, and it's coming. And we got to be ready as musicians. We got to be ready for those months. Okay. I got my UP accent starting to happen here. Okay, cool. So here's my interview with the great Adam Rapa of Lotus Trumpets.
There was like a period of time where you didn't release a lot of, maybe between 2006 and 2018, but between your two records that are on Spotify, it seems.
Yeah.
And like in your bio, you're talking about how these opportunities popped up to record and then they didn't manifest. That's
one of them.
One of them.
There
Yeah.
are a lot of others. I mean, the bane of my existence has always been being an artist with lots of ideas and no money to see them through. You know?
Yeah. Anyone with vision, I feel like probably has that same, I mean, unless you come from wealth or something.
Right.
You know, it's like that's that same issue. It's like, how do you get things funded?
Right. So I've been trying to make things happen in conjunction with festivals. And there's one, the Korno Festival in Poland, where I've managed to get some really good material out of that. But even still, it's involved a lot of compromise and a lot of work that the job was a lot harder than it should have been.
Sure.
Because it wasn't just a simple session. Everybody comes in and we do the gig and that's it. It's, you know, just like herding cats throughout the week in rehearsals and then whatever. You know,
and then it's in front of an audience.
Yeah.
So you don't get to go back and go, let's do that again. Were you doing that at all? Were you going like, this is a recording session, we're going to go back and do things again?
Nope.
It was just like one time?
Yep. So we had to, and the editing was a pain in the butt afterward because, live gig, the mics were placed where they kind of needed to be for the live gig, but there was a lot of bleed and phasing issues and stuff. So it was, just to come up with those recordings of Armando's Rumba and the two Beethoven pieces that we released from a couple of years ago, that was was like 7 days of going to war inside of Pro Tools.
I bet.
Make that happen, balance all that shit.
Yep.
So it was, but that's basically the best thing I've ever gotten out of a festival gig. There's lots of swing and a miss. Other places where they promise you the moon and say, this is, don't worry, our guys can play anything. It's embarrassing, the results at the end. It's like, well, okay, so yet another year passed and I haven't released anything.
Yeah, can't use that.
Right. But it's definitely changing now because Lotus is doing well enough that there can be a budget for, for me to record music that can be used for promotion, etc.
Right.
So thankfully, finally, we've entered a stage where as soon as I get through my commitments for the summer, I can start really focusing on recording.
Yeah. So I was going to ask, how do you get from being in a rut like that to making moves again? I imagine you felt frustrated that you weren't getting things out, that those stars weren't aligning. I think probably a lot of musicians are in that place. How do you go from being in that rut to where you are now?
Well, it was, to compound the issue, I was also, during this whole period, I was bouncing around. I lived in a lot of countries. After leaving Blast in 2007, I was in Seattle for a couple of years and then went to New York for a little less than 2 years, and I went to Japan for a year and did a gig with that. My wife at the time and I relocated to Vienna. We were there for a couple of years and that really did not pan out. So so we moved to Copenhagen for a couple of years.
And Vienna or Copenhagen, that's where you were when you did the Youngblood stuff, is that right?
It was a little bit later than that. After Copenhagen, after being there for a couple of years, and I played in the Danish radio big band and I was actually gigging there. It was cool. But it was all, I wasn't a soloist who had, I was, maybe playing solos in ensembles, but just in that context, I didn't have my own thing.
Yeah.
That was also a point of frustration, but, it was at least a step up, so I was happy there, whatever. Content. And, but then I split up with my wife and I went to Belgium for a year, and then the Netherlands for a few years. COVID hit, so it was just one series of not only did I not have the money, but I also wasn't in a position like most musicians are in, where you've got a scene, you've got a local scene, and you can call your people and bring them in and record stuff, even if it's for free. That wasn't an option on the table either. And so it was more than just not having the funding to see artistic projects to fruition. It was also just like, oh my God, I'm isolated, so that was really tricky. And the solution to all of this is also pretty complex. It's, I just had to eventually find myself in a place where I have community, and I don't have musical community around me, but now, because again, Lotus is doing so well that now, as long as I hit a dealership or, do a Tupperware party wherever I'm going, the trip will pay for itself. So in a way, I've got kind of an unlimited travel budget.
Yep.
So that's helping with the geographical problem and just the, money for travel and all that. Check. And I just needed to also get into a place where I was kind of healthy enough to, be centered and to be able to prioritize and do the work that needed to be done in order to see any kind of project to fruition. It was just kind of, I felt like for so long I was just dodging pies that were flying my way. That just staying afloat, just making sure that the bills get paid and the wheels keep spinning. That was enough. And a lot of just, either self-medicating or whatever, just hiding from the world. There was a whole bunch of that too. So in order to come to this place where I am now, it required the success of Lotus, especially, which was a whole lot of hard work, a lot of shit shoveling. And which took me further away from being an artist. So for a while, I knew that I was planting seeds that would eventually turn into something, but it meant a further diversion from what I really wanted to be doing.
Well, when you're in that place where you're just trying to make bills happen, I'm going to start a company is a huge idea. So, did you go raise money? Did you have designs already? Did you have somebody you knew who was a trumpet designer and that you worked with them or something like that?
I kind of assumed that we would get to the
I was going to ask this later.
Yeah, no.
But
well, it's actually a pretty, it was definitely a painful thing to even discuss. It was a really, really tumultuous time when I didn't intend to make a business. It began with just my search for an instrument that would work for me. For years, I was waiting for Dave Monette to make me something.
Right.
Literally, 3 years or more, I was waiting for another horn that wasn't basically a euphonium facing forward.
Sure.
and I didn't know kind of that I was going to be getting something that was halfway to a low brass instrument when he made it. I thought I was commissioning a trumpet, but it was something much bigger.
Yeah, was it a 4-valve thing or something?
Yeah,
right.
Which would have been great. If it was a P3, would have been fine. But it had a flumpet bell on it. And you could fit a number 2 pencil down the throat of the mouthpiece. So it was really, really not what I needed for my gigs. And I struggled, and I worked my ass off, and made it work for the most part. But that also contributed to my not being able to release bootlegs from gigs that went actually pretty well because they didn't go that well for me.
Right, right, totally.
So I was really frustrated with the situation, and push came to shove. This would be really nutshell because it's actually quite a sensitive subject. I was my first partner in business completely screwed me over, stole everything, physical property, intellectual property, launched, as if I had nothing to do with the process.
Oh, my God.
But how the horns actually began was me working with Andy Taylor.
Okay.
Andy, while instead of Dave, who wouldn't do so much as make me a mouthpiece with a reasonable throat size. Like literally, his dogma prevented him from saying, "Yeah, sure, even I'll prove you wrong," and just make you a normal throat on your mouthpiece. From being completely unsupportive and obstinate with anything that I wanted outside of what he wanted for me. Which isn't so much of a dig. It's like, okay, cool, that's who he is. Fancies himself the Wizard of Oz, and we're all supposed to just play what he wants us to play. But I felt that wasn't it, of course. So I wanted to go and work with somebody who would make anything. And Andy Taylor's that guy. If you want a horn that looks like the Batmobile, he's your guy.
Yeah,
real
sure.
Orange County chopper kind of dude. And so I went, and the round 1 Lotus horns, actually this was pre-Lotus. This was, a good year and a half before I had a company called Lotus.
Sure.
We were, I was basically just kind of arranging his compositions, right? Just, tweaking, dotting I's, crossing T's, shaving down weight, and experimenting with metal placement, and basically just curating what I think were his best horns. Mm-hmm. Which was really fun, and it wasn't just Andy. Also, his right hand man, Matt Martin, was huge in helping to see some cool design elements come to life, and the 4-valve and all that stuff, and it was working great. And we basically at the very beginning, I put in $3 or $4 grand. My partner put in $3 or $4 grand, and we, had Andy line up a table full of horns, and I said, okay, so let's do 3 horns where this is the control, the controlled experiment, except let's change, the material of the lead pipe or the thickness of this or the whatever.
Right.
And once we found, it's like, okay, this is this is a thing right here. So let's swap out the lead pipe or the bell or whatever it was on these other horns, make a bunch of a whole round of this model. And I went around and was selling stuff, just to help pay for the further R&D. Even the first horns were great because Andy knows what he's doing, and
sure.
and I like to think that my influence in those designs made them even better. So they were great from the beginning, and that made it very easy to continue paying for another round of R&D. I sold like 10 horns before we even officially had a company.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I went to New Hampshire, opened up an LLC because no sales tax in New Hampshire.
Okay.
Worked with Mark Schwartz, who's kind of like, he's a trumpet player and the accountant to the stars. He's Arturo's accountant, Herb Alpert. He was Ziggy Canstell's accountant. He's here. You actually, in music business, you should definitely talk to Mark.
Yeah, cool.
And we worked out an operating agreement. He was went to law school, so accountant/lawyer.
Yep.
And worked everything out. And of course, just before we went to launch, my partner kind of threw a grenade in the room and refused to sign the operating agreement and just like completely pulled the rug out from under, which was definitely a major setback.
Yeah.
Like stuck a lawyer on me. He was like,
so
ugly.
This is the partner that also threw in $3,000 or $4,000 to start the research and development on the
which was
on the horn lines.
the extent of his contribution. He was otherwise a fly on the wall. But all of a sudden, here I am, like without my company, my designs, it was like, wow, this was out. This was super out.
Yeah.
And he, ugly in a way that I'd never experienced in my life. I'd never been betrayed by anybody, really. So that was huge. And it took a little while to recover from, because first I had to dig myself out of or like just basically deflect his accusations and lawyer up and all that. And I finally got to relax. My wife at the time and I reverse engineered the expenses. I never want to be the money guy. and if you want more detailed information about how Lotus runs and all that, just talk to Henrik. Because something's got to give. I can't. I just can't do it. But my partner was the one that was handling the money, and he just bold-faced lied about where the money went, and saying that I was stealing money, etc. So we had to sort of reverse engineer how it all went down, because at least I knew what I had sold, how many horns for, and could, and interviewing Andy and reverse engineering the costs to him, etc. And long story short, got my lawyer to send have a conversation with his lawyer. His lawyer backed off immediately. It was like, oh, okay, and I know that statute of limitations means that really he's still in a precarious situation. Eventually, he's going to owe me half of everything he's ever sold. Wow! Because he's still selling.
Wow!
And I want to be really careful about how and when I really make noise about this, because it's such a sensitive topic. It will end in arbitration one day. Man. It was just such a shame. It really, and I, of course, I knew he was a shark, but I thought, well, I'm a Care Bear. I probably need a shark of my own. But I didn't think
there is a thing about building a team around you and finding people that do what you don't do. And like you talking about with the money thing, it's like you got to find somebody that does the money thing so that you don't have to do that.
Exactly. And but once I got clear and could start focusing on moving forward, this is when it gets really beautiful and just fills me with gratitude. So. Andy knew that I had gotten screwed over, and the valve block maker, Meinl Schmidt, knew that I was getting screwed over, and they basically floated. And Henrik was a student of mine who had sought me out while I was living in Vienna, flew, took lessons, really devoted person, and he's interesting because he's not a shark at all. He's a bigger Care Bear than I am, but he's also a numbers guy. He was a competitive chess player as a kid, just like the right left-brained sort of mindset for that, and also heart in the right place, comes from a great family. He's just, Henrik's a beautiful person. So that was kind of an obvious choice. It's like, I need somebody like this. Okay. So the two of us charted a course forward. Meinl Schmidt floated us 10 blocks at over 800 euros a piece. And Andy floated us 10 builds. So that got us, that's how Lotus started. By the good graces of the people who knew that I was in it for the right reasons and I was doing good work. And so
this was like, we'll give you materials, sell the horns, and then pay us later.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome.
And it worked instantly. We were up and running. We had been hand to mouth for some years, even years after that, waiting for payments to come in so we could buy enough stuff to build the next horns. It was really, and that was happening. Andy was doing the building for some years, and as far as mouthpieces go, we started working with Egger in Switzerland. That was on Charlie. That was a recommendation from Charlie, which worked out great. Because those guys really, it's an amazing team and they're doing great work. So it was really easy to go in there and collaborate in terms of and come up with something really new. In the beginning, it took a lot of. Well, it wasn't actually all that easy in the beginning because they didn't necessarily believe me when or trust that what I wanted them to do was going to be better because it was unconventional. And so in the end, I ended up getting, or not in the end, but eventually I sort of earned the trust of okay, it may not be something we've ever done before, but let's do it for them. And they almost, I think, had disbelief about the end result until we started ordering way more mouthpieces than they could produce. We got an investor who came in with a couple $100,000 and allowed us to get ahead of orders and make large purchase orders of rods and tubes and everything we needed. And that really began a change when we could actually flex a little bit and we're still, at least we're not hand to mouth now, but we're still keeping the money inside of the company, keeping it growing. We just bought another lathe so we can double our mouthpiece output, which will help a lot. Eventually we're going to need a machine that costs $500,000 though, in order to continue making things that we're not making yet that we'd like to.
Yeah.
So it's lots of axes on that lathe that we're going to need. And, so it's by no means a cash cow for any of us, but the sales are actually going really well. So at least we can chart a course based on what we want to do, not just what we're stuck with being able to do. With far fewer options than we like. So
I don't know any other. I'm trying to think of another trumpet company that's run by like a real trumpet player. that like really can play. And it's like, you're like a virtuoso trumpeter, and now you've designed your own horns. I mean, I think that's a pretty unique avenue that you have here.
Yeah,
right?
It was, again, it wasn't, I didn't even plan this for myself. It was really just, first things first, how do I get myself the horn that I need?
Right.
And then it quickly became, wow, everybody else is into this too. Okay, well, I guess there's a thing here. And it was more just of a passion project in the beginning. Like I didn't expect it to be, had no aspirations for it to be a business. You know, I figured,
it's interesting because like seeing whoever's doing your social media is doing an awesome job, and like
they are.
The intersection between what you do as a trumpeter and like being able to also promote your company, and at the same time, it's like seems like there's a real nice intersectionality there.
Yeah.
Where it's like, here's me doing you're teaching, you're playing, they're also posting stuff you're doing with orchestras and things in other countries. But yeah, like what a cool intersection between running a business, starting a thing that actually feeds this thing that you do artistically.
Yeah. Eventually, I hope to have the same kind of situation as like Terence Blanchard, where the soundtrack money helps fund the tours of small groups. You know?
Yes.
I really appreciate the content that we put out most. That's where I'm helping somebody, because that's really the extra unforeseen fringe benefit of being in this position with Lotus, is that wherever we go, it's not just about selling mouthpieces and stuff. Like it's the job. My real job is to just teach people how to play the equipment better. Because most people's muscle memory is programmed to compensate for problems with the gear.
Right.
So not everybody figures it out right in the beginning when they're playing. They don't even, they don't notice because they're playing too high in the pitch in the upper register. A lot of the benefits don't automatically reveal themselves from the beginning. So I need to, guide people through that process of feeling more relaxed and being able to access the higher levels of achievement that you can have with the instruments. So it's still a teaching gig, in a way. And I'm really, really careful and conscious of not wanting to sully my reputation as an educator by turning it into just a sales event. Because that's kind of what it normally is, right? You've got players that are endorsing a brand and who, peddle their wares on master classes. And master class is the answer to this kid's, the way that they're playing is buy my mouthpiece, which I'm not into. I get it. I understand, and there are ethical ways of doing it. I'm sure somebody does. But in my case, like I really try to keep those two things separated.
Yeah.
And if I'm at a festival where they want me to do a master class and also a Lotus demo, those two things don't happen at the same time.
Okay.
Really got to try to not cross those streams because it's already hard enough. People assume that, some people assume that this is just some kind of cash grab on my part, that it's just snake oil. And others don't even know that it's my company. They think I'm just doing for Lotus what I did for Monette, which is just be a good poster boy.
Right. People are cynical, man.
Yeah.
People are cynical. That's too bad.
And so I at least shouldn't give them any more fuel on the fire.
Sure. Yeah. So I want to go back in time a little bit. You toured with Blast 8 years? 7 years. That's a wildly physical show. Yeah. In addition to just Trumpet being a physical beast to play. It's like you're also doing boatloads of movement on stage. It's so I want to talk about two things here. Let's talk a little bit about health and wellness. So like your experiences with Blast. You're working with a physical therapist was on tour with you.
Yeah.
How did that experience impact how you handle health and wellness surrounding life, surrounding trumpet playing?
Being in Blast was huge, not just for training with a physical therapist or having somebody to sort of help me deal with my neck and shoulder tension.
Yeah.
But in general, just I do a much better job when I'm within a community in terms of like holding myself accountable to working out.
Sure.
Having a steady yoga practice and all that. It's a lot easier for me to do that with others. Especially historically. Now I'm a little bit more, I fit it in. I don't necessarily need the extra kick in the butt, but back in the day, it really felt like I needed that sense of community in order to, be as healthy as I could be. And we were helping lift each other up, and there were lots of health conscious people, and we were trying to. Some of us were trying not to eat junk food. You finish the evening show and there's nothing but Domino's open in this in this town, whatever. And so it was just something that where we were all a support group for each other in that regard. I had a really serious injury while I was on tour in 2003 that led me to just the process of trying to get well again. Got me much more heavily into yoga and seeing an osteopath and just doing, searching for solutions, Reiki, everything. I was just
Were you able to play while recovering?
Yeah, but I wasn't able to move the way that I was doing before. I couldn't touch my toes for a while.
Wow.
Which was bizarre. That took a long time to resolve itself, but it also taught me an even greater level of efficiency while I was on the gym, because I made it look good. I just didn't go, bonkers, but I did at least the bare minimum, and could do the movement, but, the more bouncing around, acting like a fool, in the Officer Krupke, in the goofball moment, I just had to chill out a little bit, but I was, for a long time, I had a steady yoga practice and was doing a lot of trumpet practicing and definitely being mindful of my diet. Then when we got to Japan, extra challenges came up, like all of a sudden a week into the first year that I was there, a whole bunch of us, 1 week, 2 weeks in, were just noticing, like, my God, my lips are getting so swollen. I feel like I get these sausages on my throat. What the hell is this? And a little bit of sleuthing, and we realized that it was the sodium content in the food.
Wow.
And we were retaining water.
Yeah, a lot of salt.
So it's like, so thankfully we fixed that and could get away from popping ibuprofen like Pez.
Yeah.
And which is a thing.
I've been there, man.
And and I experimented with being a vegetarian, or at least pescatarian, while I was on tour, and that really didn't work out very well for me, because I kind of felt like I was always behind the 8 ball, like there wasn't enough time to recover from the what my face had to do the day before.
Right.
And then I sort of found a balance where I was vegetarian enough and still follow the cravings when they were screaming. And
sure.
And it was a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah.
And I got a lot of practicing in, and some folks took more advantage of just being able to sightsee in cities and stuff. And I spent a lot of time more kind of introverted and eating my Wheaties, doing the work, which was great. And
you mentioned that it was like, because you're playing the same show every single day for maybe thousands of times, right? Yeah. You're able to kind of treat that as your control, and then you can mess around and see how effective what you're doing is.
Totally. How much practicing I did before the gig versus after the gig. It was a very consistent test of, a real put up or shut up situations. Like, all right, you do whatever you can choose whatever path you want in terms of how many hours a day you practice and whether you take care of yourself or not. And really, the only test that mattered is, and how'd the show go?
Yeah. Right.
And that was really, really helpful. It also, in general, just got me to play in a much more efficient way. I was playing my ass off and playing high notes and stuff years before in drum corps, which I also did for 7 years.
Right.
But it wasn't nearly efficient enough for me to feel comfortable, for me to feel safe in blast. After some time, it just kind of felt like my chops were just getting a little tighter and a little tighter, and one of these days,
something's got to give.
That note isn't going to come out. And there was an extra drama built into the test for me, because I had unaccompanied solo time in the show. It was just me, and it was like this gag about, I'm taking an extended cadenza, and the so-called big band is about to come in. I cue them, but then cut them off, and then it had to end, no matter what. It had to end on a big ta-da double G.
Okay.
And I really felt like I was getting closer and closer to just, shooting blanks on that. So I started really investing in becoming more efficient with my technique, and that's what made me change from, as I described, being a shitter to being a pisser.
Sure.
And it was really just because I felt like I had no choice. And of course, who the hell wants to change their technique unless they feel like they have no choice?
Right.
I'm really glad that Blast was the hardest show that I've ever heard of for anybody.
You guys took acting classes, right? Like, how is acting, like taking acting classes, doing that show, how has that shaped what you've done in non-blast contexts in the creative, artistic music?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it was dance classes as well. Okay. So we were taking, and the very beginning of our training, we're talking like a 2 hour, 3 hour acting class or dance class. We got good quality time.
Yep.
In the case of the acting, it was with George Pinney, who was the head of the acting department or drama department at IU. at the time. So, and he's just a brilliant man, really a genius. And what the acting classes did was bring people out of their shells, you know. And George was always playing the fool, like he was so crazy and asked us to go so far that, you know, most people only took baby steps in that direction, but it was still enough to get them to come out of their shells,
right?
You know, and it was great because a lot of musicians really hide behind the horns and don't think of it, don't see themselves from the outside, and don't perceive what they're projecting. And George opened us all up.
Right.
And during that time when we were performing in Disney, you know, Land of Make Believe brought us out into the audience, and we were goofing around with people, and I was, you know, proposing marriage to old ladies and stuff. You know, it was like just super fun, and that experience really got us. I mean, it made it blatantly obvious what the gig really is, which is to connect, to look, see, and be seen, as George, you know, a quote of his, and that made all the difference. And a lot of people also slimmed down big time for it, and basically we were provided with healthy challenges to rise to, and the acting classes were really, really fun, and it's things that I still do with groups, you know, like walking around in some kind of blobby amoeba, just looking at each other, just walking around, just, you know, just I'm drawing with my hands. I'm drawing movements that your audience cannot hear. But it was basically just walk around and look at each other with one particular intention, and it would be an intention that was matched up with one of the songs. So Appalachian Spring, we walk around with like "I love you" on our face, you know, really opening our hearts and communicating that, and then we get to Medea, which is like, I'm gonna kill you, hit you after I do, you know, and then Malagueñas, you know, if looks could impregnate, you know, and so there was a lot of that, like exploring not just openness in general, but openness within a particular wide range of the emotional spectrum,
right,
and that just. The implications of that is there's no going back. There's no forgetting what it means to be open, what it feels like to be open. And I still to this day, I keep it turned way down, you know, my personal energy on stage than what we were doing in Blast, just because, well, number one, I don't want to be kind of a caricature on stage. Right. You know, we're a little bit over the top, of course, in that show, because that's what it needed to be. Yeah, because we still had horns on our faces. So a lot of, in the end, what we were putting out there to the audience was just with our eyes and with the body language.
You know, Louis Armstrong, with the eyes, man, was always,
dizzy. You know, you can see when people have. When you can just see that presence on people's faces when they've really got it. But still, in a way, I mean, maybe because of some of the places that I've lived and the gigs that I've had, it's been most appropriate to turn the lights down a little bit. Sure. And be, you know, present more humbly.
Did you ever deal with performance anxiety in the early days?
No. I mean, literally, as a 15-year-old, you know, but with drum corps, my first year of drum corps, I was 14. By the time we were 15. We were down in Florida for the big finals, whatever, and we were performing for tens of thousands of people. Yeah. You know, and that was okay. So that was unnerving a little bit, but I was 15, 16. You know, it was just a couple times. You know, and I didn't have the nervousness of auditions either. I auditioned for very few things. You know, I was only in school till I was 16, so I only, you know, auditioned for Allstate a couple of times. The second time wasn't even an audition. It was, entered the room and they were like, "Okay, so good to see you. Yeah. Here's what we're doing. Tribute to Clifford Brown." You know, and it's going to be, you're going to have great fun. So I haven't even really participated in that world either. So I've been allowed to basically circumvent the whole fear factor involved in.
So to what do you attribute the ability to perform with that kind of confidence, without that like nagging self-doubt that a lot of musicians deal with?
Well, the first thing is just acknowledging, the most important thing is acknowledging that self-sabotage is going to be your biggest problem. You know, that it's nobody else has the potential to screw you up on stage like you do. And that self-sabotage will obviously be fueled by self-doubt. So if you're doubting whether or not it's going to go well, the most important thing to do is not self-sabotage, is not make it a self-fulfilling prophecy. Right. And that involves mostly, for some people, it's fake it till you make it. You might be shitting your pants with fear, but carry yourself with super superhero posture.
Right.
Keep your chest open. Like do the things that will at least, even if you're mentally or emotionally suffering, that at least will keep the ball rolling physically.
Right.
Because it's that, once you get into fight or flight, to the degree that impacts the way you're using your body, and all of a sudden the muscle memory that you've developed in the practice room of how to play this piece and where the breaths happen, all of a sudden this stuff gets really screwed up because you're taking shallow breaths now and, breaking phrases where they weren't being broken before.
Right.
It's your own damn fault if it happens.
Yeah.
So you really just have to, if nothing else, keep control over your body. But in my case, obviously it helps that I've been really good for really long. I don't have self-doubt because my mom gave me self-confidence from the time I was a toddler.
Yeah.
And
she sang with you a lot.
Yeah.
Sandra, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there, with that self-confidence, even before I started playing the trumpet, and then being blessed with having a great teacher when I was young, and being way more, playing way more trumpet than anybody my age group that I knew about, in anywhere within the radius that I was aware of at the time, that helped for me to just feel, a sense of confidence that this is going to go pretty well,
Right.
And that sort of, then I did have problems that I needed to work through that weren't stage fright, but that were other kind of problems involving ego and survival instinct and all that. And that was that every time that I had a great performance in Blast, typically the next show would be bullshit, and I guess what I'm talking about is the solo, is Everybody Loves the Blues, that moment where I got to improvise. And my audio memory is pretty good, so I would find myself on stage performing, say, Sunday matinee after a great Saturday night performance, remembering or listening to what I played last night.
And then trying to recreate it.
Yeah, and just getting into this awful feedback loop where
Yep.
I was judging what was coming out of the bell even before it came out.
Yeah, man.
And
I've totally been there.
So then I got hip to Kenny Werner and Effortless Mastery.
Yep, I've read it a couple
also,
times.
Free Play by Stephen Nachmanovich.
I have not read that.
Great one. Free Play is a great book.
Yeah.
And it addresses that X factor that is just who are you and what are, and how are you projecting that? How honestly are you projecting that?
Right.
And that helped me to get over that hurdle and to just basically arrive at a place of complete equanimity, where basically and I don't know, is profanity allowed on this? Okay, great. So the two-word philosophy that I've lived by for a long time is just fuck it, and it's something that I actually feel like I'm expressing physically before I play. I just take a breath. Okay, here we go. And if for anybody, I recommend if there's any doubt in your mind, if you feel it, if you're like, oh shit, here we go, bracing for impact. First of all, try to take that breath before you enter fairly early, with a couple of bars in advance, so that you can throw away a breath and just
Sure.
Take another breath and now come in. But there's just got to be some kind of shake it out that happens, whether it's physically shaking or just saying to yourself, well, fuck it, here we go. An expansion on that two-word philosophy that's so helpful is basically like, this could turn out to be a horrible note or a horrible phrase or a horrible gig, but either way, the best chance I've got is just chilling out and committing to what's most important, which is not thinking about myself, but thinking about you, the audience. And as long as you can turn your focus towards making sure that everybody feels great and is inspired and having a good time, then and they will forgive you, and knowing that they will forgive you for a lot of cracked notes and a whole bunch of bullshit that could happen, as long as you are there to serve them.
Right.
That's, that can be another shield from feeling attacked as well. Just commit yourself. If your ego is feeling threatened, then tell your ego to, go somewhere else and have a coffee, because you're just here to serve other people. It all ends up contributing to feeling much more comfortable.
Yeah. I feel like intent, sincerity all have such a huge factor, play a huge role in how the audience hears the music and experiences the music when it's happening in real time.
Yeah.
And
we have strong
you can get away
bullshitometers
with a lot of cracked notes or whatever.
Yep.
I think about like great free jazz groups that like had really captive audiences, and it's like, why are people into this? And it's like, well, there's this real deep sincerity behind the music.
Absolutely. And people can feel that on a subconscious level. Non-musicians can tell the difference between somebody who's just dialing it in or phoning it in or actually there to connect, you know, and for, intending for this music to be the soundtrack to their emotional experience, and so that's basically all that there is to it. I don't know how easily this translates for people who are dealing with performance anxiety or stage fright, on a more extreme level.
Yep.
But whether it's easy to understand and assimilate or not, the very simple truth is it's not about you. And as long as you can get the hell out of your own way and serve the people, then you'll be fine. It'll be okay. And that has implications with, which music do you choose to play, and why are you choosing to play that tune? And what are you saying with this piece? And I've tried to find a nice healthy balance between playing stuff that's really pyrotechnic, that's showcasing virtuosity, but in a way that's also musically valid, in a way,
totally.
Not to, call other music invalid per se, but, when the music is about nothing more than demonstrating the virtuosity of the performance or the composition or whatever, then it leaves people feeling like something's missing.
Sure.
Unless those people aren't necessarily developed intellectually enough to appreciate that there's something more waiting for them somewhere else.
Right.
It's like, just listen to Herbie and Wayne and get a sense of what it really means to be in honest communication with people. Mm-hmm. And that's it's almost a different activity altogether from performing a concerto that sounds like the soundtrack to somebody's really anxious day. There's a lot of performers performing stuff that I wonder, like, has there been any thought put into how you want me to feel when I'm sitting in the audience?
Right.
So it's the intention is the fun part. What is your intention is a test of, like, who are you, not as a musician, but as a person. And what are we going to do? Like, what are you going to do with all this technique? Right. And I hope that people leave really feeling juiced up, feeling inspired, and like truly inspired, not just lip service, but like that people want to go home and figure some stuff out, or commit themselves to listening to something outside of their own stylistic box or whatever as a result of seeing what I'm doing. Sometimes, I guess the worst feedback that I ever get, the worst comments, which are meant to be compliments, is, man, you scare the shit out of me. You make me want to hang up the horn. It's like, man, it should be the opposite.
It should be the opposite, man. Run to the practice room.
Right. Whatever. You do what you can.
Yeah. So what do you have coming up? Like, what, in terms of musical projects? We talked a lot about Lotus. Like, it feels to me like something big is coming.
Yeah.
Like that's just like based on hearing you play and just like the range of what you can do. And then hearing you talk about connecting with audiences and making music and honesty in music. And so are you planning something right now?
Big time. It's twofold. On the performance side of things, I did a lot of writing during COVID. That was one of the things, music was just pouring out of me. Or also, I came to greater clarity about how to work with material that I had, semi-recorded, partially recorded years before, like that project we were talking about, maybe before we started recording, but this interview. But there's some stuff that dates back to 2008, or compositions that go even further back that still have never been flushed out. I came to a greater understanding of what I actually want to do with that, and clarity about how that can go. And so I've got a mind node list that's just got a whole bunch of main nodes with a whole bunch of what do you call that? Like branches connecting with huge lists of songs and references and blah blah blah. It's quite a master plan, like a mind palace, really, of plans. With this kind of ensemble, with this instrumentation, I'd like to record all these things. Blah blah blah. With this instrumentation, it's this. For this festival, it's going to be this. I keep track of things that way, and the list of things that I'm going to record is, it always grows. But at this point, I know that coming into the fall and the winter, I'm going to have the budget to actually be able to start really, checking some of those boxes.
Awesome.
And a lot of that involves starting by recording, multi-tracking myself, doing a whole bunch of, like on my first record, I recorded Poopy Pants Blues in a way where it was just kind of improvisation frozen in time. When I recorded something, it was like, oh, that's a nice phrase. Okay, cool. Save, keep that. And now let me, instantly come up with a background for that. And so I'm going to be doing some of that with thematic material I think that's enough that all I need to do is just go through that same exact process to finish the composition. So some of that stuff, and I'll definitely be hiring a rhythm section and some more brass, and I'll just really start producing. That content artistic content is where my heart is right now, because I feel like artistically constipated. There's so much good stuff in a wide range of genres as well. So that's going to be the tricky thing to navigate, is sort of my ADD, ever shifting desire for this thing to be my point of focus. I want to record this song or focus on this sound, and now next week it's something else, and it's a little bit tricky to follow all the way through and just see one project to the end. But for that reason I'll just work on singles, and just not commit myself to a full album of any particular concept or sound or whatever, and just throw a bunch of stuff out there and see what really sticks, and let the people, my audience, decide what they want to, what I'll record next. Sure. So there's that, and that's long time.
It's a fun way of thinking of it too. Involve people that are going to be listening to your music and in the process a little bit. And I feel like it'll be helpful to release a whole bunch of stuff that's well produced and high quality and attention grabbing in a wide array of styles, because still I'm pretty typecast with a bunch of people. Some people know me just as like a high note monkey, and others, so it's really tricky. I don't fall into an easy box, and so I'm sort of disregarded, I think, in a lot of cases. But the more you record and release things, the more, you as an artist is defined.
Right, and we'll see,
or undefined.
We'll see which flavors end up appealing to the most people, and that's not to say that my art will always just be a reflection of what people want, because that becomes anti-art. Totally. But because there's such a wide buffet available of styles and instrumentations and whatever, I might as well just let people, take requests, right?
Sure.
So there's that, and then the other thing, of course, there's always, this is separate from just Lotus. Lotus, I'm always going to participate in whatever capacity I'm needed for designing new stuff, and once we get to the next level in terms of being able to produce more stuff, we'll work on flugelhorn and cornet. We've got a piccolo prototype, but there's still more work to be done there. Cool. So whatever's needed, I'll do it. But in general, I'm going to try not traveling all that much. Maybe 1 week max per month, whether it's a Lotus travel or a gig. And if I have one, I'm not going to do the other. Sure. I really want to be at home a lot more and just focus on production. Yeah. So there's that. But the other main branch of my attention is going to go towards creating an educational website it's going to be pretty big. It's already, the amount of content that I've got is pretty big. And I've got, recording exercises with folks, recording longer form interviews with trumpet players, and recording our practice together, recording our recording session, to have kind of troubleshooting tips, to farm things out like that. And
cool.
And it's my intention to make sure that people who are sort of socially isolated also have access to the information that they need in order to succeed. Something to compensate for a lack of community, which has become much more of a problem, I think, in the era of COVID.
Totally.
And it's still kind of continuing on. And in the States, it seems like there are fewer bands now than ever. So there are a lot more people need a scene that just doesn't exist around them. And if you don't know, you don't know. Whatever we're talking about. So I hope to provide a wide array of educational topics, that well curated, not just content of my own, but from other cats, whether it's Brandon Ridenau or Miroslav Petkov or Ashlyn Parker, whoever. Yeah. It's really important to me that I take the role of curator, because I'm a bit. Well, of course, I'm opinionated. I'm an artist. I'm opinionated about who I think has good information, better than good, really, this is the guy you should be talking to about this, about, being a freelance classical trumpet player who's also, just people who are doing it successfully and staying healthy and happy, and who are lifting up their students. I really want to be in a position to shine a spotlight on them and bring that all together in a website that really gamifies the process of getting there step by step towards whatever you're looking for. So that's initially being funded by Lotus, but of course when that business is up and running it'll pay back Lotus and just be self-sustaining.
Sure.
The Trumpet Academy is what it is. And I also already own the websites for the Sax Academy, the Low Brass Academy, the Woodwind Academy, a lot of that stuff, Percussion Academy, the Conductors Academy.
Big picture.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've already got friends and colleagues lined up to provide the content for those other instruments that'll fit within roughly the same system, where it'll be a website and an app, and it's coming. We're pretty deep into it now. I've been threatening to do it for years, but again, life getting in the way.
Sure.
Just as it's gotten in the way of my recording.
Too, man.
Yeah, sure.
It's a long journey.
And now, and it also took a little bit of time for the right people to fall in place. Like now, Sam, our video guy, is fantastic, and now just having him on board, I feel a lot more comfortable about it getting done. Because there's way too much for me to do alone, and I'm not willing to commit myself full time to running an educational website. That's not where I'm at. And it's the same as I'm not willing to commit to being a professor at a university anywhere.
Sure. Yep.
So we've got a great team, and it's as long as I can delegate what needs to be delegated, then I know that a project can move forward. So there's a lot of stuff happening, and I've already been recording a bunch of content and piggybacking off of Lotus Travel and recording the interviews and it's going really well. So the next year, if we were to have a conversation a year from now, it would be a very, very different one. We'd be reflecting on lots of new stuff. Cool. And hopefully we can do that.
Let's do it again, man.
Yeah. It's thank you for what you're doing and shining a spotlight on those of us who are trying to do something new and or interesting or innovative in terms of monetizing the work that we do in a way that's actually helpful, beneficial to other people.
Yeah.
I love it. I love coming to ITG and knowing that, okay, so the sales, that's going to happen no matter what. Like, we've already sold a whole bunch of horns and a bunch of mouthpieces. And so that's guaranteed, because the quality of the instruments sell themselves. I can really just focus on helping people, like for real. We got people signing up for 20-minute slots or 15-minute slots, and it's just, okay, hey, what's your name? What do you need? What are you into? Why are you looking for another mouthpiece or another horn? Big picture. What do you need? And just helping some of those, some kids I find are generally wandering around kind of sleepwalking, pretty clueless and don't have an opinion.
Right.
Which is really strange. Don't have a concept.
Right.
Which is really hard for me to understand, because everybody I know who's an artist has always been an artist, has always been, opinionated about what their sound should be, who the best players are, or at least, who they respect the most, who's playing matches their voice the most, and seeking out all the information on our own to continue to grow individually. I see a lot of people walking around, they seem to be more dependent on their professors, or someone to tell them what to do and how to do it, and just seeing some kind of fish eyes when I ask, could you tell the difference between those two things? A little. It's like, well, which one do you prefer? And they look over at their professor, who's also sitting in the room watching them, asking, like, I don't know, which one do I like better? It's like, come on, that's a little, and those people really need help. They need to have that spark turned on, or to simply have someone sit down with them and say, look, Johnny or Susie, what are you really into? Like, what do you nerd out? What are the rabbit holes you go down on YouTube when you go home?
Yep.
What's that? Maybe you might want to focus on that, unless you're planning on going back to college again to figure out something that's actually going to work as a career for you.
Right.
Because you're late to the party, buddy. There's some of that needs to happen as well, which is a sense more tricky topic to cover with folks. But I try in subtle ways to help get people thinking about actually following their passions, or taking their passion more seriously, in case they just didn't know how much homework really comes along with that.
Right.
But then there's other people who just need one little, like, hey, have you thought about putting your air, sending your air further forward, further upward when you're playing low notes? Oh my God, thank you for that. Moments like that, where that's really gratifying to when I've got that 20 minutes and I try to make the most of it and make it as valuable as possible for them. That's a really fun part of this. And just wandering around and, dishing out hugs and, just being just being present. And,
Totally.
these kind of events are really cool. They're super draining, and I need some recovery time afterward.
Yeah.
But it's really, really cool getting to just be a Swiss Army knife and have a conversation with somebody on a purely emotional level, on a psychological level, on a whatever they need.
Yep. Sweet. Well, we're gonna link Lotus. We're gonna link your socials and stuff in the description, the show notes. That's it, man. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Pleasure.
This was awesome.
Hey, thanks for listening to my conversation with Adam Rapa. If you dig the show, follow the show wherever you listen to podcasts. Usually that's a plus sign at the top right-hand side of your podcast app. That way you won't miss any other great episodes of How Musicians Make It. Our theme music was written by me, and you can find links to that in the description, in addition to all the links related to Adam Rapa and Lotus Trumpets. If you have a topic you'd like me to talk about, or just any general questions, you can email adam@gigbossapp.com. I'll see you on the next one.